هلا يا 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 هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the program. It's a Saturday morning. We only have 2 interviews lined up, but they're both pretty important interviews, and we do need to unpack in as much detail as we possibly can. The first one is with dear Nadia Mir. I've got Fatima Mir on my mind. She is the niece of the late Fatima Mir and Irfan Habib, the son of Professor Adam Habib. I couldn't resist that. I'm sure people like to be known in their own capacity, but they are amazing people in their own right, and we're going to talk to them about their achievements, their activism and life in general, but also the initiatives that they're both involved in right now. So that's what is going to be covered in the first part of the show, and later on we're going to be talking to Flax Trends. Kumo Teko is going to tell us about the trends for 2018, 6 specific trends which are being unpacked for the year 2018. But let's cross over to our first guests in the studio, the first 2 of course, and these are people with hearts as big as mountains. They are activists and they fight the fight of, or they take up the cudgels of people who are totally defenseless. In this case we're talking the Palestinian issue and a whole host more. Nadia, assalamu alaikum. Before I say Fatima again, Nadia Mir, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum assalam. Good morning.
Lovely to have you in the studio yet again. Third time lucky. And Irfan Habib, assalamu alaikum. First time for you.
Second.
Oh, okay, but not with me.
Not with you, no.
Nice to have you here. And we're going to be talking about the initiative. We're going to talk about the issue around the exhibition that's being held at the Constitution Hill, and a whole host more. We're going to talk about Ahed Tamimi, who's been imprisoned, but we'll get to that in a minute or two. I want to talk to this young man in the studio with us this morning. What is your involvement with Nadia Mir and the flag that she's flying so high?
Sure. So I got involved through a society called Girl Rising Wits, and I was part of the team that co-founded it last year, at about halfway through last year. So we used to work with an NGO called FEED, and FEED is very strongly involved with the Girl Rising movement globally, which is a UN-sanctioned global movement aiming to raise awareness around the barriers to education that young women, especially girl children around the world face. And so we screened a film at WITS at the Great Hall, and we recognized the potential to form a fully fledged society, and we headhunted certain students that were passionate about this. And so we formed the society, and one of our COM members was very strongly involved with Nadia through the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign at WITS. And so she told us about the campaign and what was going on, and we said we'd really like to get involved. She introduced us, we got added to the WhatsApp group, and that's when Nadia contacted me.
What I find very heartening is that when young people are still on campus, when they're still busy studying, they're very active and very passionate about all of these issues, and they really keep the fires burning. But once they leave that space, the space of uni, and enter the workplace, the big bad world of work and consumerism, the passion dies down as far as activism is concerned. What is that you guys can do to make sure that that is maintained and ongoing, and not wait for the next generation to, to take the baton from your hand?
Yeah. So off the top of my head, one of the things that we like doing, a lot of student societies like doing, is to get previous alum of the university who were actively involved with a specific society or with a specific field to come back to the university to chat to the new generation of students, or the new students who are in that space now, to ensure kind of a progression of knowledge, to say these are the challenges that we faced, this is how we overcame them, maybe you can do something different or learn from our mistakes, and to get that intergenerational free flow of information. But you're right when you say it's really it is an issue where students in the activist space go and enter their careers, and then because of the working world don't either have the time or lose the passion, and it is definitely a problem, and it's something that every society should try and kind of address.
That hasn't happened with you, Nadia. I mean, your uni years are behind you a long time. I'm not trying to suggest you're old, but I mean, you are now in the real world. But and of course, you come from a family of really hardworking activists. Maybe that's one of the reasons why you're continuing your activism work. But you've carried on regardless.
Absolutely. I think with the increasing injustice that you see all over the world, I think you can't remain silent. It's not an option. So whatever needs assistance, and especially issues that are not taken forward, really are something that I like to work on.
There is so much to talk to both of you about today, but the one thing that comes to mind right now is the issue around Trump making the outrageous remark about Jerusalem being declared or becoming the capital of Israel. There's been outrage all around the world to that issue, and I have no doubt that when we talk about Ahed Tamimi, that this is how the situation arose. But he's carrying on with that narrative. Just today on TV, he was continuing it and almost suggesting or warning those, in his words, nations or rogue nations that are not supporting him in this fervor of his will not get future aid from the states.
Well, I think that in some ways, I know it's outrageous, all the things that he's saying, but it's a wake-up call to the world. America's been getting away with its bad behavior for a very long time. And with regards to things like in Palestine, it's been on the back burner because other issues have been more pressing. And this has actually revitalized people's energies.
So better the devil you know.
I think so. I really think so. And this is what I'm hearing from Palestinian activists. They said that Trump actually did them a favor. That the Palestinian issue is now on the world agenda. There had been no progress with these peace talks that have been non-existent for many years. Now they're dead. And now the world gets to see that there is no two-state solution that's possible with Trump behaving as he is and making these declarations.
Was that a possibility up to this point in time?
I think that going into them, Palestinian leadership at the time that they signed it, trusted the process. They felt that this might be a way to sort of save lives and do through a peaceful process, which is what our leadership under Mandela did, with the transition. But unfortunately, they were outwitted, and there was another bigger plan in place. So.
Going forward, I have no doubt that Trump is going to push ahead with this agenda of his. What do you think the outcome's going to be and future repercussions to Jerusalem becoming the capital of Israel?
I think that's very hard to determine right now, but judging from what's happened in the UN, he really has not had much support for his position. The world's countries have come out against it. Even strong friends of Israel now, like India, like President Modi, India did not side with Trump on that issue.
Mm-hmm. However, he is threatening to withdraw aid from those countries that haven't supported him. You're nodding your head in affirmation. What do you have to add to this part of the discussion?
I just, the whole issue with Trump is just indicative of his bully-like nature, and it's almost not surprising to hear him say, no, we're going to withdraw aid from certain countries. And in the end, it all boils down to how the international community is prepared, what steps the international community is prepared to take to make a stand against this bully-like attitude.
Let's go back to Girl Rising. I'm going to be yo-yoing between the two of you because there's so much to uncover on the show this morning. And we do have a bit of extra time, so that's wonderful. Where do we stand with Girl Rising now? It's about empowering and educating the girl children, not only in South Africa, but all around the world. You've obviously got collaborations around the world. Has the project been, has it started, has it been initiated yet, or are you still working towards implementation? So
it's very early now. We're still quite young as a society. We had a project last year with an orphanage, or a children's home rather, in Calvin, where we think we made a lot of change. I mean, we also encountered a lot of barriers. It was much more. It was easy on paper, but when you're there on the ground, when you're dealing with these issues face to face, you see just all these other issues that just pop up, and so it is a difficult space to work with. And we are young, but like we think we had a good start this year with the Free Ahead campaign and Free Ahead and All Child Prisoners campaign, and we want to keep the momentum up throughout the year. Part of our focus for the year, we want to work firstly with the campaign, but also with we want to link up to the He for She movement, which is about creating ambassadors for women's rights, not only within the female community, but also within the male community, because we think that's where a lot of change rather can happen as well.
We're going to look about how is it that we socialize our boy children for them to have this total mind shift, because we live in a very patriarchal society, not only in South Africa but all around the world. We know about women being vulnerable, women are being raped, they're being exploited. We know the issues around human trafficking and a whole host more. And I think it ties in very nicely with Ahed Tamimi and child prisoners, which you've just mentioned now, and that's quite shocking because there is a lot of that. But let's take an ad break. When we get back, we'll talk to you, Nadia, about all of these issues. Nadia Mir and Irfan Habib are my guests this morning. We're talking about the Palestinian issue, we're talking about gender issues, and a whole host more. Do stay with us. The lovely Nadia Mir and Irfan Habib are in studio. We're talking about the issue around child prisoners, in this instance very particularly Ahed Tamimi, who is a Palestinian girl. Apparently she visited our shores last year, and of course the caretaker was and will always be Nadia Mir. How has this impacted on you, Nadia, knowing, I mean, she's like I remember you coming in here with the little gorgeous girls here to the studio. How has it touched your life?
Oh, it's devastating. It's really difficult to watch from afar. You feel like you want to do more and you just want to be there to give them a hug. For the family, I am very close to the Tamimis, especially since they traveled here to South Africa and they were here for over a month. And I was with them daily.
I know.
So some of the very outrageous things that have been said about the family and about Ahed in particular really is quite disturbing.
By whom?
Okay, so Ahed Tamimi has emerged as the new rising star in Palestine, and people have tremendous hope for the future in youth leadership, and particularly led by her. And, you know, in Palestine, there's been a leadership gap. The senior leadership are all in jail, like we had in South Africa. And with the Palestinian Authority failing people, and with the devastating impact of the blockade on Gaza, and Hamas then deciding, you know, to work with a unity system, there isn't even a leadership there that is very strong. And so it has been up to the youth, and we've been hearing the terms in the media about the youth intifada and youth taking upon themselves to take decisions. So something like what Ahed did was to, you know, in slapping the soldier, that's something that everybody wants to do. And so if she is celebrated as a hero, in Palestinian society, but on the other hand, Israelis see that as an outrage. How dare she do something like that?
She's a nothing, she's a nobody. They're the chosen people that have invaded this land which they claim is theirs.
Yeah, and it's a very, very strong image that people see, but I think it jerks you to see a young girl who's unarmed and facing, armed men, armed to the hilt, covered with protective gear, walking up, and she challenges this. And we need to stop and ask the question, why? So from the Israeli narrative, it is, this is the law, this is the authority figure, and she is challenging the authority. And so many people, and we've looked at this even on social media, people that are not really completely aware of the situation, when seeing a young person slap someone who is in uniform, they immediately start to question that. And so they're wanting to probe more.
Despite a world outrage at Ahed's imprisonment, she's actually indirectly, unconsciously played into the hands of the Israelis, has she not?
No, I don't think that I would see it that way. I think, she's been celebrated as a hero on the one hand and an absolute villain and terrorist on the other. And you had calls from the Minister of Defense saying that she needs to be behind bars for the rest of her life. You had others...
Just for a slap.
For a slap, and for standing up to authority. And you have senior journalists that say that she needs to be dealt with in the dark when cameras aren't there. So you have that kind of attitude from leadership.
And threats, obviously. I mean, what does that mean, dealt with in the dark?
Yeah.
I mean, the things that pop into my head by that statement is absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get that, and you see then she's being celebrated in social media. She's been called the Joan of Arc. She's been compared by another Israeli writer to Anne Frank, a Jewish girl.
Yes.
And that was during Holocaust week. And he's been severely chastised for it. There was a call made for him to be banned, his writing, and for him also not to be allowed any airtime either on radio or on TV because of that statement. And he's been forced to retract that. So she has polarized opinion there. And I think in all of this, if you had to ask me, is she this huge hero and the Joan of Arc? I would say no. I'd say that she's just a girl who has gone through tremendous odds, and she was responding in what could very much be described as, courageously, but it's completely understandable. If you look at circumstances through that day, because I do follow the family very closely, and I saw what was happening early in the morning. So what this incident was streamed live on Facebook, but her family members in the village, including Jana and her mum, they regularly post live feed from what's going on. And the reality is that this is a Palestinian village. This is their land. And they get invaded by soldiers that come into their village.
Heavily armed.
Yes, and tear gassing them from early that morning. Windows were shattered. Those photos were posted on Facebook. So you're sitting in your home and you're getting shot at. And then 20 minutes before this incident, her cousin, who is the best friend of her brother Mohammed, they have the same names, Mohammed Tamimi was here in South Africa. Their cousin Mohammed, next door, gets shot in the face at virtually point blank range. The bullet enters through his, and this is a facial wound, so enters through his nose up into his eye socket, and bullet gets lodged in his skull. So blood's all over. Her father is gone. And
he's probably lost his eye.
Well, amazingly and miraculously, he has recovered.
Alhamdulillah.
But he's currently minus half his skull. because of the brain swelling. They will now put in a plate later. So he, you know, you can imagine what would that feel like if you were in that circumstance and your cousin's just been shot, your dad's gone across to see what they could do to get an ambulance through. This is a difficult, it's not an easy situation. It's not as though you can call an emergency number and get them in, because that would depend, their entry would depend on whether the military allow for that. So all this is happening, and then the same soldiers, in her mind, this is what the families say, but that will have to be determined. They say it's those same 2 soldiers that were involved in that shooting that walked around and were wanting
intimidating,
to leave.
Obviously.
No, they, according to Bassem, it wasn't that. They were shocked themselves at what they had done. And so they left the rest of the troop. And they had walked away from that, but they wanted to escape and get to another spot. And they walked around and walked up the pathway to their home. And Ahad was furious, and she said, out, out. Her first response was not to run to them and push and shove and slap. She first started verbally saying, get out of here. You're not allowed here. Leave us alone. She started to say that, then she walked down towards them. You're not seeing what the Israeli media has been showing.
It's very one-sided.
No, it's just showing, it is one-sided, but it's just showing an excerpt. You're only seeing one part of it. You're not seeing any of the rest of the picture. So she says, leave. She then asks him verbally. Then she starts lightly, sort of slapping on the hand, trying to move him
And
away.
you are sending we're going to view that 1-minute clip a little later on in the course of the interview.
Yes. So, this is what happened. And then what is not really visible in that clip is that he swatted her first, and he swore at her. And that is what got her to lose her temper, and she slapped and she kicked him. It didn't really faze him too much. He decided, just to walk away. So he's being celebrated as being very tolerant and patient with this crazy girl who's out of control. And she's been,
obviously, by the Israelis, been painted as the villain and a future threat to their state. But obviously it's changed the course of her life, her history going forward, because no doubt she's now going to follow the path of activism. We hope she's going to hold that flag up very high. Let's talk more about all of that and more right after the ad break. The lovely Nadia Mir and Irfan Habib are in studio talking about girl rising, Ahed Tamimi, and child prisoners, not only in Palestine, but all around the world. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about the incident in Palestine, the imprisonment of the 14-year-old Ahed Tamimi. She is 14, is she not?
No, she is actually now 17.
17
She's just
years.
celebrated her, well, if you can call it, she spent her birthday
in prison.
The 17th birthday on the 31st of January in prison.
What are prison conditions like in Israel, depending where she's been held, whether in Palestine or in Israel, depending how you look at it? Do we know how she's being treated and what the conditions are like?
Yes, we have a fair idea. Both her parents have been imprisoned repeatedly. So we know that from them, and we know that from the testimonies of other children. There's an organization called Defense Children International and the Palestine branch of it that sends out statistics. They do interviews and they keep documents relating, they do interviews, they record what other child prisoners have done, and Israel has a terrible record as far as that is concerned. We need to remember that in Palestine, Palestinians are subjected to Israeli military law. That is totally different. It's so totally different systems, legal systems, from civilian law, where we talk about justice standards, and military law, which essentially is upholding occupation type laws. So always there's no fairness discussed. What is the law? The law says that they are to be occupied and they are to comply. So if they have not complied and they transgress, then that's criminal. And in this instance, and the majority of the children that are arrested in Palestine are on allegations of stone throwing. And stone throwing, and this is a ridiculous thing, carries a sentence of up to 20 years.
Sure.
20 years. The youngest recorded child that he wasn't taken in, but he was questioned, and the family was 2 years old.
Oh, goodness me. How
He
ridiculous.
He threw a stone from...
But what is the international community saying about these atrocities, these outrageous atrocities against the Palestinian people, and more so the Palestinian children?
Well, they are. A lot of them are making statements. A lot of human rights organizations have been supporting the campaign. And if you go up on social media, you will see that there are events, and there have been protest actions right from when she has been arrested in December. Amnesty International is actually planning now to take this up to the international criminal courts. So there are organizations that are taking it up, but whether much is being done, that we can't really say. But we need to keep fighting, and we need to make people more aware of what is happening.
All right, I'm going to ask you about the awareness campaign that is being rolled out and has rolled out. Also the event at Constitutional Hill last week, but we'll come back to you about that in a minute. We've got about 10 minutes to this interview. Let's hear from Irfan. Hearing about these young child prisoners, you're a youngster yourself, you're at university, we're leading a cushy life here in South Africa and all around the world. How does that make you feel, and how much more do you believe young people should get involved in these type of initiatives?
Yeah. So I was actually thinking about this last night. So on my way to, not last night, a couple of nights ago, while we were setting up the exhibition, I was actually in an attempted hijacking.
Oh.
And I mean...
But you're okay now?
Yeah,
fine.
And luckily we managed to drive away and everything was fine. But when I got home, I said, okay, now I'm home, I can sit, I'm in a safe and calm environment, I'm secure. And I was just thinking, Palestinian children don't have that luxury, and not just Palestinian children, but children in war-torn and in conflicted areas around the world don't have that luxury, where they're confronted by violence every second of their life, every second of their day.
The violence, as we are so outraged by or horrified by, is their normal.
It's their normal, exactly. So they live through this every day. Then they get home, but it doesn't stop there, because they can be raided at any second in the night, any minute in the day. They don't have that safety. They don't have that aura of calm that they can retreat to. And that's something that just struck with me, because imagine living in a space where you can't feel safe for even a minute of your life. That's just mind-boggling.
It just goes to show what we take for granted here in South Africa, and we need to thank people like your late aunt and all the activists that fought for our freedom, because we truly are living the good life, are we not? We're living their dreams, what they dreamed about. Nadia, now there was an exhibition last week which you curated at Constitution Hill. Tell us about that, and where else are you taking the exhibition to, or was that a once-off?
No. We'd encourage everyone to go through and take a look. Right now, in its current form, it will be on all month.
For how long?
The entire month of February. And we will be participating in the Human Rights Festival, that is an annual event at Constitution Hill. So it's extremely significant that we choose such a venue to actually host an exhibition of this sort. And that is because that is the site of the apartheid's women's jail. And key people, key leaders, amongst them my aunt Fatima Mir and Winnie Mandela were held there. In the courtyard that is now named Fatima and Winnie's Yard.
Lest we never forget.
It holds a permanent exhibition of drawings and paintings that were done by my aunt while she was incarcerated there.
Wow.
And the specific gallery that we're in right now with Ahad's exhibition, and by the way, it's titled I Am Ahad. That is a cell that used to hold 70 women.
Sure.
So it's very interesting. This is now a living museum. And when the children and Ahad and the families visited this, we all commented that it would be wonderful, especially her parents who had been jailed before, that some of those institutions that they had been jailed in also turn out to be a museum like this is. And
So
it's in the
what
past.
can we hope, because it's running for at least a month, it'll be open to the public for about a month. What can we hope to view when we go there? What's the highlight of the exhibition?
Okay.
I guess that's the wrong word to say the highlight, because every piece would have its own story.
Yeah, well, you journey with Ahad through her life. This is the story not just of Ahad, but of that community of Nabi Saleh. Nabi Saleh is a small village with about 500 residents. It's just outside of Ramallah. And the residents there have been actively resisting the occupation. This particularly after their water well, the source of the water in the village was taken over by the settlement that had been built on their land. So she has been involved from a very young age, and we see a very young little girl, possibly at around 7 years old. And so we see her standing every week, and they're beautiful pictures of little children, other young boys riding a bicycle, holding the flag, and then being attacked. So you see her running away, carrying balloons, but being running away from all the tear gassing and shooting around her. So you see her growing up and her coming of age, literally, her confrontations with the soldiers. Some are very valiant and, she's happy when she starts out, and the next images you would see of various confrontations, because she has taken them head on. She has challenged them. But you also see the very vulnerable side of her. When she was very little, there's an image that's particularly striking of her with her father and tears streaming down her face. That image was taken when her mum was shot. Her mum was shot repeatedly. And the most serious injuries were to her mum's femur. So mum was not able to walk for over 2 years. This is a girl who's had to play the role of mother to her younger brothers too. And then you see her confronting them in all sorts of ways. So this
And
is
let me stop you there, because it's 1 minute to wrap up time. We don't want to give away too much. We want people to visit the exhibition. How did you manage to get hold of all the pictures? Through her family, I presume?
No, actually not. A very humble young photographer and he's Israeli. He's someone who feels that this needs to be his contribution. And every week of their demonstrations, which is Friday after the lunch prayers, is when they do their demonstrations. He has made it a point that he travels out to them and he documents what is happening, because there is so much being said about Palestinian propaganda, and he wants to be there to say.
So he wants to tell the story as it is. Your closing words on the show this morning?
I would say just a message to the youth to please get involved. It doesn't mean that you have to link up to an organization, whether it's just going onto the Shamsan Facebook page, seeing what the news is, sharing that news, raising awareness. Because as long as we keep the spotlight on this issue, it prevents them from being further abused in some of the horrific ways that Nadia mentioned earlier.
Nadia, in closing, are you taking the exhibition outside of the country, around the world?
Yes, in fact, we don't know whether Jana will join, but we're hoping that she will be. We have been invited to an exhibition to exhibit in the US. We're at a women's conference.
Great, wonderful to chat with you once again. There's never enough time to talk with you when you come in, but we will catch up with you again. And amazing. I haven't been to the exhibition yet. I know it's going to be mind-blowing, undoubtedly. Keep up the great work, and just always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for being on the show, both of you, and Assalamu alaikum. That was the lovely Nadia Mir and Irfan Habib talking about activism, talking about the exhibition at Constitution Hill. If you haven't been, I urge you to go out and see the story unfolding in pictures for yourself, courtesy of the lovely Nadia Mir. Still to come, Kumo Teko from Flax Trends. We're going to look at the 6 trends taking the world by storm in 2018. And welcome back. And from the atrocities of the Palestinian situation, or rather the atrocities being visited on the Palestinian people by the occupiers, the Israelis, and the story of little, well, she's not so little anymore, 17-year-old Ahed Tamimi being imprisoned for slapping an Israeli soldier. And of course, the exhibition is happening as we speak at Constitution Hill. We're now going to talk trends for 2018, trends going forward. And we have the lovely Kumo Teko from Flax Trends. They visit us once in a while to keep us abreast of what's happening, not only in South Africa, but all around the world. And why is it important that we know what's going down? Well, if we don't, we're going to be totally out of the loop. So Kumo, morning, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Would I be right in saying if we don't keep abreast with these trends, we're going to be left behind?
Definitely, and especially within a business aspect. I mean, we've heard of the likes of Kodak, who are now trying to work back into getting into the business industry. And we'll
Too late, she cried.
Oh, that is true. And we've seen it with companies such as BlackBerry and Blockbusters. You know, the list goes on and on of companies that were leading within their industry sector and fell behind due to what we'd now call the 4th Industrial Revolution.
So the whole idea is to keep abreast, to be in the game, or think ahead of where you are. So you've got to think 10 steps ahead. Definitely. So we're going to be looking at the 6 trends for 2018, but you've also touched on the key word. I hear a lot of business gurus throwing the word around, the 4th Industrial Revolution. Let's talk about it and the impact on our lives. And I know robotics come into the picture here as well, and there'll be people sitting at home and wondering and worrying whether they are going to become obsolete, depending the type of work they're involved in or the type of work they do. But there is obviously, if your current position becomes obsolete, the trick then is to reinvent, to re-innovate.
Definitely. And it's something that Dion touches on a lot is upskilling. And that's what companies are now starting to work towards.
Okay, let me just stop you there. I'm very rude. Let's introduce you properly. Okay. You are Kumo Teko from a company called Flax Trends.
Yes.
It's headed up by Dion Chang. Just give us a very, very brief history or synopsis of the company, and then we'll go into the 4th Industrial Revolution and the 6 trends for 2018.
The company Flax Trends was founded by Dion Chang. We are a trend analysis company as well as consulting, and we provide trends as business strategies. So we help businesses in understanding what is happening within their industries or within the zeitgeist, which is the spirit of the times, and how they then can remain relevant and moving forward, and how they can set out strategies to interact with their consumers, to lead within their industry, or to bring upon different cultural change within their companies.
So large and medium corporates or companies can engage with you to say, we should have made a 10% increase in our turnover for last year. We're predicting a 10% this year, but we don't think it's going to happen because we feel there's a missing element here. You'd go in and you'd make an assessment and tell them what's happening globally.
Yes.
To streamline their business in that direction.
Definitely.
Okay.
Hit the nail on the head.
The fourth industrial revolution, it sounds a bit overwhelming. What is it? How do we embrace it? Let's start with the first, second, third, and then where do we get to and how do we come to the fourth?
It's everything technology. I mean, we've seen let's say the first industrial revolution was with factories and manufacturing. We moved into a space where the internet then became something that was new, where you had this device such as your laptop or your computer and you just got information from it. And then we moved into a space of being connected through various platforms. Social media played a very big role in that. And now we're branching into an element where we are connected through all our devices. Your phone can speak to your fridge, can speak to your car, as well as now the concept of robotics. Automation. It's no longer an idea, it's starting to become a reality. And when we're looking at the concept of the fourth industrial revolution, we're talking about how companies and how society is now going to be a lot more merged with technological aspects of the Internet of Things, and as well as I mentioned earlier, robotics.
So Kumo, if companies and civil society do not embrace robotics, and this new wave, the fourth industrial revolution, that's the way of the future, obviously. What's going to happen to them? Bearing in mind that a lot of people watching us this morning are going to wonder, what if I'm working on a production line? Does that mean my job is going to become obsolete because robots can and possibly will do my job? I'm thinking car manufacturers, all sorts of production lines. There is that fear, and we are looking at issues around a lot of countries, South Africa included, where there are just not enough jobs to go around, very especially blue-collar jobs.
Definitely.
What's the answer then? Because then you don't want this mass uprising.
It goes back to upskilling. It goes back to creating additional jobs. So, I mean, what Dion tends to point out is that someone's going to need to train the robots. That in itself becomes a job.
And fix the robots and build the robots.
Exactly. So we're not necessarily looking at the traditional jobs whereby you would go to school and they'd ask you what you wanted to become and you would say an accountant and you would go to university and then get that qualification and then automatically become an accountant. We're now moving to a place where you need to be multifaceted, so that when it does come to a point where the job title that you wanted to have when you were little has evolved into something else, you are then able to be upskilled for that position.
Obviously, this is going to generate a lot of insecurity amongst young people and old people alike. Are key players, government, educational institutions, etc., putting their heads together to redefine the type of parameters that we should be working and playing in, number one, and then also education. Where and how do we streamline and get our young people thinking about different ways and different jobs that are going to be on offer in 5, 10 and beyond years? Because the job market and the education, university and technicons, is not going to, well, you're going to have, your doctors, your lawyers, your accountants, that's still going to always be there. But other jobs going to evolve.
The interesting thing about looking at technology and the different industries that it has now created is that there has been a disconnect between businesses and legislation. I mean, we just look at the likes of Uber and the issues that they've had with whether or not their drivers are their own drivers and they're just sourcing from Uber, or whether or not they actually are employees of Uber. What legislations are starting to now take is that the concept of the gig economy does now need to be mentioned within legislation, just looking at labor laws in itself globally, and how do they then ensure that employees, or be it contractors who are now working for these companies that are not fully employed but are employed, are protected and are taken care of, and still allow for space for the companies to bring this new element of working into the corporate sector. And with regards to education, what we are seeing is that STEM education and rethinking the traditional landscape of education is being considered. I'm sure there are some schools in South Africa and in itself that are now starting to look at providing STEM education, and initiatives that are even pushing for females especially to embrace the concept of STEM education.
I'm also thinking, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the water crisis in Cape Town. And I'm thinking about the Eskom debacle. If we had had our finger on the pulse, we probably wouldn't be sitting with those problems. Apart from, obviously, the collusion and the, the corruption issues. But our finger on the pulse as far as technology is concerned, and keeping abreast with infrastructure and technology, we probably wouldn't be in this situation.
It's a tricky one to say. I mean, I think when we, I remember once when I was on the show and you mentioned that the chilling factor that Dion left you with once was that the war for the future was going to be on natural resources, and that is what we're currently seeing.
Very especially water.
Specifically water. And with the global population constantly increasing, technology in and itself constantly evolving, these elements and creations do require elements of natural resources. It is a bit tricky to say. However, it still falls into the path that legislation and governmental institutions in some countries are still lagging behind in the elements of taking note of what is happening globally and starting to rethink how their structures need to react to issues such as these.
But it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all.
If you obviously, if you are innovative, if you are sharp, and if you want to be part of this whole big change and you want to join the fourth global, the fourth industrial revolution, you won't be left behind. You'll probably be the leader of the pack if you climb onto the bus right now.
Definitely. I mean, just with the likes of Uber, again, the likes of Amazon, we are, as society, embracing technology. We don't realize it. We don't take note that this is the fourth industrial revolution, and that's because we're so immersed and we're so connected. It's like second nature. It's like breathing.
Sure.
Having your phone and being able to call a ride from your cell phone, and you automatically know how far it is, who's driving, and how much it costs. So we are in a space where it is possible. Anything is literally possible with the use of minds coming together and innovating.
Right, let's take an ad break. When we come back, we're going to unpack the other 5 factors or the trends for 2018. It's not only in South Africa, it's all around the world, isn't it? Kumo Teko from Flax Trends is here talking to us about trends for this coming year. Listen and watch closely, because it will and undoubtedly have an impact on your life, your business, and your environment. We're talking trends for 2018, courtesy of Flax Trends. Kumo Teko is an analyst, a trend analyst, and she is bringing us up to speed of what we can expect not only in South Africa, but globally as well. Now let's look retail and marketing.
Yes.
The issue around advertising as well. The boundaries are becoming pretty blurred, are they not?
Definitely.
Again, with technology. Magazines, etc., broadsheets, all of that is going to truly change the way we consume advertising, news, and so forth?
Definitely. I think what we're seeing is that the retail sector, as we're well aware, is struggling. It's something that we have mentioned within our new rules of retail report and presentation, where we're talking about companies that are now thinking differently to how they can interact with their consumers and how they can bring their consumers into the store. At the same time, we have seen that print and publications are struggling as well.
Can I just take you a step back?
Yes.
Malls are the thing of the 20th and 21st century, late 20th and 21st century. But when you talk about the whole retail landscape changing and online marketing and buying and selling, are we going to see those spaces closing down or getting smaller, shrinking? A mall, and a shopping expedition was almost an outing to the mall.
Yes, it was that experience.
How's that going to change?
It's changing in that they're rethinking the reason for having so many malls. And South Africa is actually one of the countries, well, the only country in Africa that has the most malls. What we're seeing overseas is that they are now creating these spaces or these shopping centers that have now closed down. And they now changed into being places for rentals for car dealerships. They are now being built into clinics and being built into schools that are a lot closer to the wider landscape of their communities. And at the same time, stores that are still using the brick and mortar system are now expanding on their spaces. So we're seeing hybrid stores where you have seen the likes of Airbnb are now partnering with certain retail stores to provide an alternate experience to their consumers. So there's a lady that they had once mentioned who wanted to sleep in a bookstore for her birthday, and she got that experience. And what we're also seeing is even with restaurants, they now have certain hours, some restaurants have certain hours where when they're closed, it becomes a co-working space. So it's that concept of either finding an alternate experience for your consumer or actually rethinking your space and seeing how you can expand on what you can provide to your consumers.
Well, we're not going to frighten off those people who trawl the malls. It's an outing for them. It's an all-day experience. It's the event that they look forward to for the weekend. The entire family goes to a mall, does their grocery shopping, does their whatever else shopping that they need to do. They then take in a meal and a movie, and that's the experience for the day. So we don't want to frighten them off. It's not going to happen overnight, but this is a space to watch because things are going to change.
Definitely, and we've seen it with the likes of Marie Claire in America, who have now brought their content to life and had pop-up stores in Soho, and they allowed for specific categories within their magazines that their readers loved, and they brought that to life within a retail space. So it's not necessarily saying that the end of malls is going to be a complete abomination. However, what we're saying is that there are new layers to shopping experiences. It's not just going to be an online and an offline. There's a no-line policy, and what we've seen that with Alibaba and how they are working with Alipay and connecting their consumers.
And they've made a huge success.
Great, grand success within their retail space. And the likes of Amazon, who have a similar approach but different purpose and different standing. But at the same time, some stores are still opening up, and they are creating an alternate experience. So it's not just walking into the store because you want to buy a specific pair of shoes. They're connecting your Instagram to the store that will then push you into getting into the store. They're providing different reward systems, so forth.
Trend number 3, banking. That's going to change radically. Yes. I'm thinking about FICA, FICA governance as well as far as banking is concerned. How's that all going to operate? And as a consumer, how are you going to be protected if you're not FICA verified, or if a business or whoever is not FICA verified? Are we not leaving ourselves open here to a lot of fraud and fraudulent activities?
Well, what's interesting about the financial sector is that it's being disrupted bit by bit, which is something that our other trend analyst Bronwyn Williams, who spoke on the new rules on the new finance report, mentions, is that we are now moving into a space where brands such as Amazon, such as Uber, are now creating some elements of financial services. And what that does is then it builds on brand loyalty. You're more likely to trust the brand that you buy your grocery from to feed your family, to possibly also do your banking, knowing very well that they are able to actually manage their money. And that's the same with the likes of Discovery, who are launching their bank in 2018. With regards to legislation, it still falls into the line that because businesses are now pivoting into new industries, legislation then needs to pivot in itself to see how they can protect the consumer.
Is this happening elsewhere in the world as we speak?
It's slowly happening. It's not necessarily a full-on disruption. So we've seen it with Amazon, who have created their own currency, and we looked at brand currency. Uber as well has also just released a credit card for their riders within America. So it's not a full-on complete disruption that the likes of Amazon or Uber are going to provide full-on financial services. It's that bit that peer-to-peer loans are now becoming a concept within the millennial sectors versus the baby boomers. And then you have the brand loyalty, where you get certain points and you get certain brand currency. So it's the small segments.
And we are drawn to that as consumers.
Definitely, we are, because you trust that brand. If you can trust them to provide you a specific service and they haven't failed you.
And get an incentive in the process.
Definitely. You're more bound to want to interact more with it because you trust that they will still deliver.
Now, we're talking fourth industrial revolution. In this whole space, we're looking at disruptive technology, which is very uncomfortable for a lot of people. They need to embrace it. What do we mean when we talk disruptive technology? We know that it is meant to make you feel uncomfortable.
Disruptive technology is just changing the ways in which we live and the ways in which we were used to certain aspects. I'm going to bring the likes of Uber again. In the past, the concept of using your phone to hire a car was not necessarily something we were used to because it didn't exist. And now we're moving a step further, where Uber's going into automated cars, where you don't necessarily need someone in the front seat to drive the car. You direct it and it will specifically get you to your destination.
Thought, but anyway.
Definitely so.
Yeah.
So disruptive technology is technology that is being created that is now disrupting traditional structures of business and traditional forms of how corporates used to interact with their consumers.
And traditional ways of thinking and doing things, and even everyday activities, for example.
The biggest one would have to say thus far has to have been social media, because now brands have now been shifted in a way that they need to find different ways to interact. We now interact differently. People have Tinder and they can have been full-on relationships just on social media, just by the use of their handset. And now we're moving into a point of the year of last year, we had highlighted it being the year of voice. So what happens after the mobile era? We now connected through our cell phones, but now we can communicate and just talk to your phone and it can answer you. We saw that with Siri, and your cars are now, you can now talk to your car, you can talk to your fridge, and everything is so interconnected.
10 years ago, I attended 10 or more years ago, I attended a function where they were talking about where technology is moving to, and they said you can talk to your fridge and check what you require, what you've run out of, what you should be bringing home. Is there milk in the fridge or not, for example? Definitely. I thought, yeah. That's like we're never going to see the day that happens. And I can't believe it's here already. That age has arrived. But let's hold that thought. Let's go for an ad break. Kumoteko from Flax Trends is here talking to us about the 6 trends that are truly going to challenge us and is taking the world by storm. So do stay with us. We do hope you're enjoying this. And this is not futuristic science fiction stuff. This is happening as we speak, and we need to embrace all of this new technology in the fourth industrial revolution. If we don't, we're going to be left way, way, way behind. And we're talking to Kumo Teko from Flax Trends. We're talking the fourth industrial revolution and the 6 trends predicted to be rolling out not only in South Africa but globally as well. Now, we've covered about 3 trends. Let's look at the natural world versus the new forms of biotechnics, is it?
Yes.
What's that all about?
So biotechnics is now looking at how we are going to use our bodies and being connected through that. So,
Yo!
but we've already been doing it though.
How?
Your fingerprint. Apple
Voice
phones,
recognition.
voice recognition, facial recognition.
Right.
That's already just the small pieces that are slowly being used, where your body features are now being used as passwords for you to be able to get information or get your personal information. Moving a step further, we have now heard of people who are chipped. There's a company in Japan who has 60% of their employees who have been chipped, and now they meaning that they have a little chip within their
implanted into their person,
their wrist, or wherever it is, and they can now access the building with just putting their wrist against a technological device.
Gosh, but that also means that then you can be tracked, or your movements can be tracked even outside of that building. I mean, I'm thinking satellites orbiting in space can track you and track every movement and every action of yours. Do you think people would agree to something like that? I mean, your absolute private personal space is almost being invaded.
With regards to technology, there's always going to be a push and pull, people that are for it, people that are against it. It brings to forth the element of ethics. It brings to forth the question on privacy. Where do you draw the line? One could argue that you, in itself, opening your laptop and going onto your browser, they've already tracked your history, and they already know. Companies collect your data from social media platforms. Typing your address on Google, people already know what your house looks like.
Oh my word!
So,
and it's true. Yes, I've seen my house.
Have that
yes.
line of privacy?
Absolutely.
Or are we now questioning of what does it mean to have an element of privacy within a world where we are so connected?
And the young people today put their entire lives onto social media platforms anyway.
We embrace it because that's what we know. We don't know a life before Google or before Instagram or Facebook. That we're just embedded. That's just embedded within our generation. I mean, with millennials, we grew up with it coming into fruition. But the likes of Generation Z and Generation Alpha, it's second nature to them.
We're going to talk Generation Z or Z in a minute or two, but let's look at the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. Who would think that they are now leading the pack or the leaders as far as artificial intelligence is concerned?
And that goes to show how technology, and this is another like of how legislation and governmental institutions are now embracing the concept of technology. It is a race to be the hub of something. You are either going to be the hub of new forms of agriculture or new forms of artificial intelligence. I think governments are tapping into the concept of the Silicon Valley hype. And they have, with them appointing the Minister of Artificial Intelligence, is in line with Dubai wanting to increase their RoboCop workforce by 2020.
Sure.
Yeah.
So people are really, or countries are really pushing ahead to try and be first in line as far as AI and robotics is concerned. What else can we expect to see as far as the world of robotics is concerned? I mean, I'm thinking, where and how else can they serve humans without making us obsolete in the workplace?
Well, the concept of cobots, your co-workers being a robot, and you obviously then being given an increased responsibility or a different set of skills to be in the same space. We also have servant spots, and we've seen that we've seen that normally now, you chatting to a chatbot that has been created to either give you legal advice or to help you in opening up a bank account. So it's not necessarily to say that humans are going to be obsolete. What some companies are doing is that they're providing two options. So some people prefer talking to a chatbot because it's a lot quicker, and the transactions can happen in a much shorter span of time versus you waiting for a consultant. For those who don't feel comfortable, they have the option to talking to a consultant. Companies are now working in finding different ways to hire people using artificial intelligence, running through various tests, and then that technology is then able to give them a summary of specific people that they can look into hiring. Then the next step would be interactions with humans. So it's working in different ways to provide different services at a much increased
And I guess the sooner countries, companies, and we as a civil society embrace all of these new innovations, the sooner we'd get settled into it, embrace it, settle it, understand it, and then just have a very seamless life with robots, artificial intelligence, the fourth industrial revolution.
The interesting aspect is that we are
without realizing.
We are easily being
exactly.
eased into it. The challenge then comes with companies and being able to ensure that their brand or their products are still being in the front line within interacting with their consumers and also within their workspace.
It is the year 2018. We're still into January. Let's look at Generation Z. What's their expectations? What are they all about? And how do we live happily side by side with Generation Z?
So Generation Z, if people are probably not sure which generation we're referring to, it's those born between 1995 and 2014. They are the generation that comes after the millennials. They have strong roots in terms of knowing what it is that they want to stand for, very activistly driven, and they are also connected. They don't know what it's like to not have their phone in their hand to communicate with their friends.
It's a part, it's a body part as far as they're concerned.
Exactly, to voice out their concerns. However, they're also aware of the ugliness and the reality of the world. They grew up in a time where the 2008 recession had a large impact within their families. They grew up in a time where they're seeing the reality of their millennial brothers and sisters going out and trying to find work. So they are more entrepreneurially driven. They want to stand for a cause. They either stand for something or they create their own cause. At the same time, they want to have a voice within the workspace. And now what we're starting to see is companies need to start creating space for Generation Z because they're now moving from varsity going into the workspace.
The expectations as far as work is concerned, and I know that they are absolutely and readily embracing the fourth industrial revolution. They've been born into it. They know no different.
Yes.
How different is their world going to look like as perhaps you or I know it?
The robots, say robots, technology, the workspace in itself, concepts of the gig economy, concepts of working remotely, new structures whereby they're not necessarily bound by a 9-to-5. They're not necessarily bound by having one specific job and that's the job that you're going to do for the next 10 years.
Or the rest of your life.
Or the rest of your life. They are more open to various concepts and speaking about various issues referring to racial identity, cultural identity. They're a lot more open-minded to the new elements of technology and cultural connection.
As advanced as we've become, and we've just got 2 minutes to wrap up time, the gender issue and the patriarchal society is still on the table.
Yes.
In this modern day and age, the 21st century, those are still issues that we grapple with.
Yes.
How do we see that playing out?
We're going to see a lot more conversation. I think what we saw towards the end of last year with the Me Too movement, we saw it as well with the various awards. It was the Emmys and the Grammys where celebrities were coming out and in support, and we had the beautiful speech by Oprah. But aside from that, what we're starting to see a lot more is the younger generation are calling people to account, and they want people to be held responsibility for it. So it is going to be a lot more discussion. How far that will then go in terms of actions being put forth will be brought to question. But women especially are no longer silent. We've seen women who
no
are
longer
leaving,
marginalized,
who are now leaving their workspaces or not associating themselves with certain brands or certain companies because they feel that they are not being taken seriously, and because they find out that the same person that they're doing a job with, who's now a man, is earning much more than them.
So they're saying me too and no to exploitation.
Yes.
And on that note then, it's time for us to wrap up. Your final words to our viewers this morning, as far as 2018 and Flax trends, what can we hope to see from you? Apart from the 6 trends that you've highlighted, what else is on the horizon?
We have an open session that is coming up in Johannesburg, which will be on the 14th of February. And
But you do need to RSVP.
Definitely. So what I'd advise for everyone to go onto our website, which is www.flaxtrends.com, and register to be part of our first open session for the year, which is through a different lens, and
Wow.
let us guide you into the different lens and to find out what is happening within the zeitgeist.
We'll definitely talk to you after the event, and it happens at Melrose Fine Ice, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'll try and be there. If not, we'll still get you in studio, and then we'll talk about it after the event. Great having you in the studio.
Thank you
It's great
so
to have
much.
people like you bringing us up to speed as to what's happening in the 4th Industrial Revolution, not only in South Africa, but globally. We need to have these conversations to bring
Definitely.
each and everyone up to speed. Lovely having you in the studio. Till the next time, as always, go well, be safe, and God bless.
Thank you.
Time for me to wrap up. Thank you indeed for being with us on the show this morning. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Do hope you enjoyed our company. A big thank you to the production team for working so hard in making this happen. Till the next time, as always, take care on the roads. It is Assalamu alaikum and Khudafiz from me, Julie Alli.
يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا 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 هلا